Good evening, all. It's Dvora Krasniansky from Adai Ad, and I'm once again excited to be bringing you another session of the Marriage Ready series from Adai Ad and Mask and the Crown Heights Community Council. Tonight we have Ruchama Klapman from Mask. So I want to once again thank you for being a very important part of this series and everything else that Adai Ad is able to do.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Shafer. It's wonderful having you on. And everyone should know that Dr. Shafer is from Empower. He's going to speak about, I would like you to speak about your program that you're involved with in Lakewood, New Jersey. But Dr. Shafer is also a cloud person, an Askan besides a therapist. So he has a lot of letters after his name. And I'm really very, very thrilled that you really were able to make the time. I know you're so involved with so many families and so many programs, which I'd like you to share with the listeners all about Empower, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I really, it's the word Askan is a pretty, it could have a negative or positive connotation in Lakewood. But I don't look at it as askanis, and I look at it as, and it's probably related to marriage. When you love what you do, and my role model, Ruchama herself, who gave me the introduction, that's usually how it goes. Someone that's been in the cloud for so many years, and I think when we last met, I said my bracha to myself is that so many years later, I should still be, trying to help or try to do the best that we can. It's not, this is what we do. We enjoy it. I don't look at this meeting as a pressure or as another task. It's something that, some people, they say, I prepared for the speech. Not, obviously I went through the topic to an extent, but we're going to talk from the heart tonight, if that's okay, just to, in a very candid discussion. If anyone has, those conversations, please don't hesitate to reach out. So we have a group practice here in Lakewood, New Jersey, of about 15 psychologists, social workers, nurse practitioners involved in, really clinical, traditional therapy, trauma, addiction, abuse, children, adolescents, adults. We have DBT groups run by Chaser Berger, who does some work with Mask as well. Emotional regulation, personality disorders, depression, anxiety, marriage counseling with Rifki Earth. I think next week, Dr. Margot Neuberger will be presenting, right? Our psychologist on board as well. And that's really the group practice that we have as well, the growing.
Our topic of tonight, of marriage and mental health. So when we announced it, some people were saying thank you, and some people were saying I'm really nervous about where this topic is going to be going tonight. So we are not, so Dr. Shafer, what are we talking about tonight as far as mental health and marriage, and what are we not saying?
Okay, I guess if you would like to answer that question, just so I'll be guided, more properly. I think if it could really be open to discussion and questions that people have, and I think the question, and it may sound like a therapist here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to take off my therapist hat at this hour, but it depends when people hear the word mental health, what does that mean to them, right? As a therapist, to me, it's like, why are we even talking about it, right? We know it, but as to a person, 2 years ago, I got a call, 1 a.m, 3 times in a row. So, usually when we get those calls, we just say, well, it's probably not something we're going to be able to address anyway. But this call was a little different, right? The girl comes home and she's ready to get engaged, and he disclosed that I've been seeing a therapist. About 2 years ago, I was going through a certain, in yeshiva, I just wasn't feeling fulfilled, wanted to get some, and I was a therapist, right? And he did great. He was by me for 3 months, right? Just, trying to figure out, should he learn a certain limud? Should he, does he want to stay in learning? Does he want to, try to get more into the learning so he could stay in it? More basic questions that every person should really be asking, not just say, I'm going to be learning for the rest of my life, 5 years, 6 years. He was trying to do the right thing. And at 1 a.m, the new potential mechutin called and said, am I hearing right that he said he saw a therapist? And this person knew me, and he said he saw a therapist. And I said, what does a therapist mean to you? To him, it was like, this person was from more of a Heimische background, never, to him, therapists are crazy, and the people seeing the therapists are crazy, right? So it's game over right there. And we had a conversation for about an hour of just letting the person know there wasn't even a diagnosis, there wasn't even anything to be, any genetics or anything like that. And it caused a big rift. They ended up not getting engaged. I don't think it was even because of that, but they were both ready, but I think it just put a dampening on everything. So when we say mental health, I don't know who's on the Zoom tonight, right? So I guess I would say this: mental health can mean a whole bunch of terms. I don't even the word mental. I think people are starting to just say emotional awareness. We all have our idiosyncrasies. We all have things that we struggle with. There are some things that perhaps are deemed more chronic, perhaps going to be more of a concern for raising families with children and, building, relationships. There's definitely going to be that. But overall, if we have a clear diagnosis of what someone's struggling with, we have a clear treatment plan, I don't see why it should be too much different than anything else, that if it's managed correctly and there's an open conversation about it, we're not hiding anything, we have an eagerness to learn and to love and to create a unit based on, I don't even like to call it defects, but based on us, it shouldn't be different than anything else. So no one should be scared. No one should, ask your questions, and we'll see where it goes.
Especially because right now they're all anonymous if you use the Q&As on the Zoom. Okay, so a question that came in is, I do have some mental illness, or let's even say that I'm seeing a therapist. How do I share that on a date so that it doesn't explode? Like, I'm wondering in that case, if it was maybe just the timing was so off and then they didn't know what to do with it.
Right. So that's the big question, and that creates a lot of concern and anxiety for some clients. I don't want to go on medication because if I'm going to start dating in a year, what am I going to tell? And it's almost like maybe I'll start sessions after or before. They're treating it like once you go on the medication, that's when you're deemed crazy. Once you see a therapist, that's, and everyone's so afraid when during Sheva brachas, the wife opens up the suitcase and out pops a bottle of pills, and oh my gosh, that's the stories. That's what we're all, everything we do, wear a white shirt to make sure that our kids go to certain schools for shidduchim, and here it happened, right? Everyone's so concerned about the bottles of pills falling out. No one's really concerned about the person that should be on the pills and is not, or the person that should be seeing a therapist and is not. That sort of, it's almost like once you do it. That said, and I think something tells me it's going to go back to that original question. How does that other person understand mental health? And, just like you want to know, I remember Rabbi Jacobs, a mashgiach here in Lakewood, used to say, if you want to know if the person is into money or to gashmias, ask them, what would you do if you landed $1 million? What would you do with that money? And sort of see, would he support yeshivas? Would he make sure that there's a fund for the children for the next few years? Or would he say, I want to go tour the world in, private jets and those, I think you can, within the dates, gauge, where is this person holding in terms of emotional awareness? Where are they holding in terms of tolerance levels? Like when I came a few minutes late here, were we getting all nervous, or we were just like, okay, we're going to start the program and see what happens, right? I think if we gauge a little, and I remember, Deborah, you mentioned something about Dr. Sorotskin, which I wanted to follow up with you, right? If you can share that with me, because I think we share that similar approach of how to slowly, give over that information, but for one reason. And I think do you remember what he said? And I'll ask you in a minute about that, Dr. Sorotskin.
Well, he was saying that we should drip I use the word drip. We should drip that information. So he also was very different between disclose and share, which I thought was an interesting distinction.
Right.
But we should drip the information, see how it lands on the other person before you share some more, and then share some more.
Right. And I think, and when I heard that, when you mentioned it, some people, over here may question, so are we trying to manipulate or fool the person? Like, why don't we just go, guns blazing and say, I have, manic depression, I have manic, depressive disorder, moderate. Why don't we just go with it? I think, and this is why, thanks to you, Deborah, and I think this is such a beautiful thing that you're doing for the community, because as much as there's so many books out there and texts and seminars, we are the most unique population when it comes to this. Our stating system is not like anywhere else in the world. And even within us, you have the Hasidim and you have the Litvish, and then you have probably more, if you want to say Orthodox, modern Orthodox. Right now, where we're gauging, and everyone has to sort of figure out where they're holding with things, right? Typically, when I used to work in the hospitals or mental health clinics, the secular population would come in and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I was diagnosed in 2008 with generalized anxiety disorder, PTSD in 2012. They're so open about it. Where almost it's like, it's not even like, why should I even be ashamed? So over there, I think in the dating system, it's part of the culture and it's part of who I am. And I appreciate that person, because even though they have this. By us, our dating system is, designed in a way and in a purposeful way where we're really trying to go more for the quality of the family and the midos, if you want to say, the character versus the money versus status, in society, even though we do fall into that trap, but we try to find a quality person. So that said, we do family checks before. That said, there's a whole dating process where we're not going to go ahead and just go party and we're going to really try to see, is this person right fit for me from a very clear, unfiltered mind. Rabbi Reisman, I remember he used to say, when you date a girl, and you get engaged to her, it sounds amazing. Wow, you both went to Israel and this year. You both love sushi. You both love, your goal is to retire and tour the world. Another 2-3 things. We both grew up in Borough Park or Flatbush. You have like 5 things where you're similar and maybe 5 things where you're dissimilar. Once you're married, a year in, it turns into 10,000, 20,000, right? Those numbers mean nothing. But on the 5 things that you're now dating your potential spouse, if you're going to disclose to them on day one that, let's just say for the more Lakewood community, you want a television in your house, right? Is that going to come out within 30 minutes? And now they know that you went to BMG. They know that your parents have a, good shalom bias. They know that you went to decent schools, and now you want a TV. So a ratio on a 5th factor, it could shut the whole thing down. And it's not because the person is not open-minded to TV or to going out to work or to a mental illness or mental health concern. It's more because I don't know you. And let me start to get to know you. And then it will be 1 out of 100 characters as opposed to 5, right? When we go to resumes, if you're going to see over there on the resume where it says, got kicked out of high school, and that's the truth. Are we trying to hide it? No, but you don't know me. So why? You're going to be judgmental, not me, right? And we want to, that's the culture we're in. And it's sort of not being in reality of the culture that we do carefully gauge, but we're not hiding either. And it's the fine dance that our culture knows how to do well. And we want mental health to be right in that, right in that package deal. This is who I am, and I can be a wonderful person, and I can hold down a job. And I also have bipolar that's very well monitored and, treated. And I also have, moderate ADHD, and I take medication as needed. It doesn't have to be more than that, but in the sensitive way that we go about it.
So what I'm hearing here also is that we're going to tell. It's just a matter of when and how. It's not something that we're going to hide so that it shows up in the suitcase later. That's right. Possibly what we were doing 30, 40 years ago. Right. And it didn't turn out well then, and certainly not going to turn out well now.
Right. I think to answer probably the main question tonight, should you disclose? How should you disclose? I think, and this is like, it's not a way to skirt the question, but it's more understand the underpinnings of marriage, and then I think the answer will become clear. Can I give a little 2-minute intro into marriage? And then I think this will be the basis, and then we'll get into the specific questions. I was on a panel 2 weeks ago, Shavuos. I was with Rabbi Yossi Shafer. We're not related. He wrote his book, The 10 Dumbest Mistakes That Very Smart Couples Do. Rabbi Reuben Epstein was on the panel, Rabbi Lamb from Muncie. And it's interestingly, we didn't come to speak about marriage, but till 2 a.m. for like 2-3 nights in a row, every conversation was about marriage and relationships, which tells us how much people are very thirsty about making marriages work and sustaining it and relationships in general. So, everyone had their, understanding of what relation, go out with your wife once a week. The man should plan, the wife should get the babysitting, make sure that you guys have fun together and not just, deal with the kids. And I have a hard time, saying stories and making things more lavish. And I said, I don't know, marriage to me in under a minute, really it's under 30 seconds, but it'll probably take 2 minutes the way I say it. it really should be just one thing. We see this in the Torah right in the beginning, where Adam, it says the Adam yadas Chava, Adam knew Chava, right? And Rashi says it was referring to physical intimacy. We know the Torah doesn't want to use words that are like tahar, so it used yada. But why yada? So Rav Sadi says is that whenever the Torah says its first definition of anything, that's usually what it means for the rest of the Torah. So when the Torah for the first time is talking about relationships, it uses the word yada. When a husband knows his wife and a wife knows her husband more, in a way that no one else in the world knows, on a physical level, emotional level, spiritual level, and that's the way it should be. When they know each other to the extent where I know why my wife is in a bad mood when she walked in, and she knows that when I'm shutting down, it's not because I'm upset at her, but because this is how I deal with my, men from Mars. We put on our, working, we go to the cave. She doesn't get offended. I don't get offended. And she sort of gives me the space and I give her the validation or the words that she would need. When it comes to that, when you know your spouse to such a level, you don't get upset. You can't get angry. It's almost like it's not possible. If marriage is just about knowing your spouse, that when my wife comes home and says, I had such a horrible day at work, I want to quit my job. And so many husbands fall into this trap and they say, you can't quit. Why don't you just tell your boss? And this happens in marriage counseling every day. It's like music to our ears already. And she just wanted to, speak it out and just be there for her and just say, it must have been a tough day. And it ends right there. But what happens is that the husband starts giving advice, the wife doesn't feel validated, they end up not talking, and it spirals, only because they just don't know either their love language, their communication styles. If the foundations of a marriage is where a spouse knows their spouse, and they're accepting and loving of who they are in their moments because they know it's not coming from, an obnoxious place. And by the way, this is the same thing for any relationships. Parenting, when your child is coming over and says, you're the worst tati in the world, everyone else has this and you're not giving it to me. If I'm going to start feeling, oh my gosh, he's so chutzpah, as opposed to he's in pain. His kid has his scooter, riding around and he doesn't. He is just expressing his pain in his way. So I still may have to be mechanechem. I still may say we don't talk like that, but I won't get upset or angry. If everything in marriage could really sum up, even going out once a week, why do we go out once a week? To get to know and remember and to tune into our spouse, right? Why do we buy, how do I know what gift to get my wife? I have to tune into what her needs are. She tunes into my needs, right? All these words, you have to be machnia to your wife. You have to be mevater. I hear people say it. To me, it's almost like, and the word commitment. You have to be committed to your wife. And I think even, I listened to some of the previous panels and I heard a lot. And it could be, there's definitely elements of commitment, but if marriage is based on commitment and you have to be mevater, you have to bend over backwards, I don't know how to sustain a marriage like that. It's almost like you're marrying someone and you're getting like a new supervisor, as opposed to you want to do it for this person. You understand them so clearly that it's not that you're bending over backwards, you just actually appreciate who this person is. If that's the case, if someone has an anxiety disorder, let's just say, and they're coming into marriage, and I know that my spouse, let's say when, she needs me to be on the phone with her if she's driving late at night, and it's not coming because she's, selfish, it's not coming because she's annoying or babyish, she struggles with anxiety. I put everything down and that's what I do. I'm on the phone with her, not because she's in pain. And if I feel that pain, we feel pain as humans, right? That's it's just a natural. When a baby cries, we feel it. We don't have to ask, you sure you need it, right? We do it naturally. If someone has any sort of mental health disorder and we understand it and we appreciate it and we're in the treatment plan with them, it's almost non-existent. So that's it. And I'm sorry, that was way too more than the 1-2 minutes. If you know your spouse and you know what they're dealing with, it won't become such a burden. It won't become such a, oh my gosh, who did I just marry? If it comes about without any warning, it was hidden from them. They see an emotionally dysregulated person, but they don't know that they've been in therapy trying so hard to regulate. And then it comes out and the husband or the wife feels that this person is really abusing me or obnoxious to me. And all those things that come along with it, it's over. And then by the time they get to see a therapist and then they get a diagnosis, marriage really works in a cycle that it's so hard to get it to stop and to repair itself. So back to your question, right? I know what all this said, right? How should we, if this is the foundation of marriage, I think mental health is not going to be any different. And if someone has something, from the fundamentals of marriage, it should be disclosed. No matter if it's a little ADHD, if it's a little depression, this is who I am. And if you love me for who I am, we're going to have a great marriage. And if you don't, and I have to walk around you, then what is marriage? Love, what does the word love mean? We asked that in front of 200 people, right? What does love mean? What does relationship mean? It's we ask it to all the clients. If anyone's going to become a client, sorry, we're giving the answer away. And sometimes clients would come back 2-3 weeks. They have no clue what the word relationship means. What is it? Someone that's nice to you, you're nice to them. If you really take a few moments, maybe days and weeks, and process it, it's a feeling of, I feel so close to you that I don't feel judged by you. I don't feel like I'm a burden to you. We merge, and that's it. So mental health as well.
That being said, a question came in, but aren't there some mental health issues that are too hard for people to live with? I'm assuming that means that the spouse, like certain situations or personality disorders that are very difficult to live with.
Right. Okay, it's a great question. The problem with personality disorders, one thing is that usually the person that has a personality disorder doesn't usually know it or notice it. And I think it's going to go back to if they do know it and they've gone through DBT and there's a progression. Just like if someone has a very rare medical condition and it's disclosed on the date, what would the person do? Call up the medical doctor and say, hey, what do you know about this? And can you tell me if what's the prognosis and what's the treatment plan? If the person says, just like diabetes, make sure the medication is managed correctly, there's no risk factor for the children, go on with it. If someone has been clinically depressed, and this happens so much, it's so unfortunate because people hear the words depressed, but we get it, and we get the calls all the time, but they've been in therapy. We can show with evidence-based, measures of how they've gone from year 1 to year 3, and they're just progressing further and further. I don't see why all of a sudden now it's a mental health issue should be any different. Are there any conditions that a person should stay far away from? I think that's a question I don't think anyone should answer. If there's a treatment in place, there's a cure to it, where there's at least a decrease in symptoms, and the person that you're dating or potentially getting into a relationship with is committed and you feel trusted that they're going to continue with it, I don't see any risk in any, even personality disorders. However, because personality disorders typically come at the age of 18, 19, 20, and then you may need a little time to get that really under control before you make that commitment. And many times the people don't even know that they have it. So it gets a little more difficult. But if they're very aware, let's say they're later stages and they're progressing and they're taking their treatments, seriously, and you reach out to the therapist if they give permission, I don't think there's anything that should stop anyone from marrying someone with a mental health condition.
So as far as giving permission or meeting with the therapist, should they firstly give permission? You must give permission, or the therapist won't share anything. But should they meet together or should the one who's not working with a therapist, like the prospective, meet with the therapist alone, or what would you suggest how to work that out?
Right. So I think, I'm trying to get off my therapist hat. It's hard to. I think that would depend on the level of security the person who's asking would need. If you tell me that you were diagnosed with bipolar, and you're taking your medication, and I never heard of bipolar, I'm not sure, and I call my Rav and he says, hey, we've had a few people in the shul or my salon that have had it. They're married now, they're doing well. You know what, why don't you go ahead and call this psychiatrist or this psychologist that I know, maybe a third party, which, not just that person's psychologist, that person's, and ask them, what is the typical trajectory of someone that has bipolar? But get the exact diagnosis, get exact medications, get yourself educated like in anything else, and see if you feel comfortable with it. If you still don't feel comfortable, and maybe what would make you feel more comfortable is speaking to your potential marriage partner's therapist, why not? And I think if we're all going to embrace the Adam Yadas Chava, we know each other, and we're starting off our marriage with really a emotional intimacy and openness, where there's no judgment, and we're just going to try to know each other, why wouldn't you want me to see your therapist, right? I'm going to be that person that's going to want to know every part of you more than your therapist. So I would say, why not meet with that therapist together if they need it? But then it gets sticky because it's an 8th date. Now I want to speak to your therapist. People start already becoming, is this for us? Is it not for us? Is he doubting us? Is he asking too many questions? Once again, if someone knows mental health, he asks 2-3 questions. If they don't, it probably would be normal in all those listening to call 2 or 3 therapists, the therapist that's shul, the therapist that's a relative of yours, and to call a psychiatrist and then get a bracha from the Rebbe, right? It's not because, they're being overly cautious. It's maybe because it's new to them. And I think if the person with the, psychological condition sees that they're doing their research, they're being respectful about it, and they're also new to it, and they're doing it in a very, healthy manner, I think it's also going to tell the both of them where we're holding in terms of respecting and understanding each other.
That being said, the person who has the condition or the illness should be respectful that someone may be new to it. And just because they're new to it and they want to do research doesn't mean that you want to drop the whole shidduch or that there's something wrong with it. And many times when people get new information, they don't know what to do with it. So if it moves a little bit slowly after they find out that new information, don't read into it and say, if they're not accepting me as I am, I'm out of here, because it's new. It's just something that they were not expecting, and people just have to adjust to new information.
Absolutely, and that's that flexible wanting to get to know the person. And you see a fascinating thing: the same person, while they're engaged, finds out something or dating. It becomes this, it's almost like this anger, and it's almost like this deceit or feeling deceived if it's not done correctly. You know what happens more often than not? 6 months within marriage, they come where the wife or the husband is stuck in bed, feeling depressed, feeling so low about themselves, maybe even having suicidal harm ideation, as well as panic attacks. And you see how the wife or the husband is so supportive. And it's almost like, let's go to this therapy, let's come together. It's almost like, and they never, either the person who had the panic attack never knew they had it, or they had it, didn't hit it, or, it wasn't something they thought they had to say. And sometimes Rabbanim or people would say, you don't have to say it. If it was managed properly, we could get into that, conversation. But they're so loving about it. And the number one prediction for anyone getting through a mental health condition is not the quality therapist you see. It's not how much money or status or support you have. In terms of everything external, the number one predictor to mental health success, which is 40%, is the structure of support that a person has from family members, from their spouses, from their parents. If someone has a solid spouse or partner with them, whether it's depression, whether it's bipolar, whether it's an eating disorder, regardless of everything else, that's going to be the biggest predictor. So we see that in marriages when they all of a sudden either develop a mental health condition or they hit it. It's almost beautiful, and they're so there for each other, and they do actually the good work once they're married. In the dating process, it gets a little more tough, but like you mentioned, Deborah, yes, just like you want them to tune into you of what depression is, what abuse is, what it was like to be neglected as a child, tune into them who this is new to them. This is like the Adam Yadas Chava, get to know them who never heard of the word bipolar in their life. Right? They thought bipolar just means happy one day, sad the next day, and now they're hearing more and more, and it's almost like it's a shock, right? Bipolar, manic, and medication, and it's like, it's so new to them, where I think we have to be respectful of that culture within our culture, that they just don't know about mental health, and that's fine as well.
And the flip of that also is that someone who with the condition would want to know that they're marrying someone who can support them, not someone who, so we were saying that yes, many of them will end up supporting if it shows up later, but some people may feel very betrayed, and so they may not support. So part of dating in general is about sharing who you are and making sure that trying to get a sense the person supports and accepts who you are. So withholding it was not to your benefit at all. And right. You may get, you're starting off on at least out the omission of truth, if not an outright lie.
Right. And that's, thank you for outlining that points tremendously. It's in your benefit to see if this person will accept you for who you are, regardless. even if they never heard of it, but they're willing to work with it. And I think, if anyone's going to say the words, let's say mavater or compromise, this is where it's at. I want to go to Florida. My wife wants to go to Eretz Yisrael. If we can't figure out each other's needs and be respectful and understanding of it, then, all the way in the beginning, it's going to just spiral and spiral. Rabbi Jacobs used to say it's very sad in the film community. And I'm keeping, let's say, to more this community. Once again, I'm not speaking about, Chabad or Lubavitcher or Satmar or Borough Park, Flatbush, let's just say Lakewood, right? He said from all the couples he used to see, 10% of them have beautiful, beautiful marriages. They're open, they're vulnerable with each other. 10% are horrible, divorce or abuse or neglect, and 80% are parav. They just lie together. It's like you do your thing, I do my thing. We're not really there for each other, and that's sad, right? If there's an awareness from the beginning that this person appreciates me for who I am, not because I'm the person that if I have supper, he'll be happy with me, and if I don't, I won't, right? But for who I am, it's in your best benefit to have such a partner going through, your entire life. So absolutely, yes, I think that's a very important piece for everyone to keep in mind. And I'll say one thing, in all my years of practice, Kimat, when someone was open about their mental health condition, very open and vulnerable about it, I've never had it that, within their lifespan, if they did follow up, it ever created an issue. The issues really only come when they either don't disclose it, they themselves are in denial about it, and then it comes out. I've never had it the other way. So it's almost like, a ratio of 0 to 100. Now, we run the risk, obviously, of on the fourth, fifth date, you really want this person. Now, what do I do? What do I do? And that's a painful moment for anyone. And it needs a lot of hand-holding. And ultimately, you're taking a risk. But like you mentioned, about if that person's not accepting of it, that's the biggest bracha, that you saw it now and not later.
Also, it's your story, it's your life, so you can figure out how to share it, whether you want to bring in the therapist, whether you want to bring in the diagnosis, because you own it for the past months or years, you know it, and you can work it out whether you want to speak to the therapist about how to share it, want to speak to an advisor, a coach, whoever it is, a Rav, about how to share what it is, whether it's a halacha question and or just how to share it. It's your story, so you can really own it. And if you want to, like I said, you want to bring your diagnosis, your pills, a story, and you want to meet somebody who knows me, because and dating doesn't have to only just be the two of you. You could bring other people into the conversation, like the therapist or a friend or your roommate, so you get a sense of what it is.
Sure. Yeah. The more open, the better. And then I know it sounds cliche, but that's what marriage is. The more vulnerable. I think there was one person that wrote a whole marriage is what? When you can feel vulnerable in front of your spouse and your children. If you can cry in front of your children and not feel I'm a weak parent, that's the healthiest thing you can do. It sounds, people don't like to hear that, but if you can be vulnerable, you're going to have the best marriage and relationship possible. That's the answer.
And that's more strong. I mean, that vulnerability is super important. More than hiding, because how long can you hide this? Anyway.
Sure, you can't. It always busts. The question is when. And the last thing you need is after a baby, right?
And how.
Right.
It's not only it's like when and how.
Right.
And maybe his or the other one's parents are also get involved, and that becomes even nastier. So let's put it all out there.
Right.
I just want to I want to say so many times over the years we've had clients where they were married. They did not share that they were on meds. And then suddenly they were somewhere and their bottle of meds fell out, or stories like that. And it was a disaster. Ended in divorce. 5 different people that I know personally over the last 2 years that did not share before they got married that they were on meds. So it's really nothing good comes from it.
And just to reiterate, there's nothing wrong with being on meds. It's the part that's wrong is not sharing. The shock of the betrayal of it.
The betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that being said, some of these personality disorders, like people are like a narcissist, whether they're diagnosed or they're going to admit that they're diagnosed with narcissism. But if you recognize it, and it's not something that you're comfortable with, you don't have to get married. Like, you don't have to marry somebody if you're not comfortable with whatever it means.
Sure. I mean, I think not only you don't have to, that's not marriage. You want to want that person. It's
right.
We're part of the frum community, which is beautiful, and we're set up in a way where, yes, we have a much less of a divorce rate. One of the questions we did by the panel, it was a funny, I felt like almost like, how can I even answer this? But where is Klal Yisrael holding, and what can we do, better? Or what can we change? And when I was moderating the panel, and I had to come up with something, where can Klal Yisrael do better? And I told the crowd, and I said, I have to be honest for a moment. Obviously we can always do better, but to say that Klal Yisrael is really stuck in a certain place, I think we're doing so great. I mean, where we were so many years ago, 20, 30 years ago, in terms of abuse, in terms of, even marriage, conflict, in terms of parenting. There are so many parenting courses. Every school now almost has, a social worker on board. There are so many, people reading the books and giving the books, Men Are From Mars and Love Languages and 1, 2, 3 Magic. We are so far from where we were, and Klal Yisrael is in the best place ever. Our school system today is better than it ever was. And I heard this from a Rav here in Lakewood. Our chinuch system is the best where it ever was. And we're typically, from where I was 15 years ago and where I am today, seeing the amount of people that are coming at preventative stages, like you mentioned, Ruchala, to want to work on their marriage, want to work on their parenting. It's tremendous. So if someone is going to shut a person down because they can't, that's fine. And we're not in the frum community, as much as, people think it's hidden. It's not hidden. It's just a different system. Is that here's me as a person, like me, not my degrees and not my money and not my, everything else. Here's me. Now we want to talk, if we're a shidduch, we have to go through the process the way we do it. In the non-frum community, it's very open right away, and that's fine too. It's just, we're going to get stuck at this point. But like you mentioned, if you don't feel comfortable marrying someone who has bipolar and eating disorder, maybe it's because you freeze and you just don't know. It's the unknown to you, and that's why obviously make it known. Then that's your choice, and don't do it, and don't let anyone push you into that.
So that sometimes we think that we can handle it, or we want to be able to handle it, because this is a wonderful person with a wonderful family, with a great job. Let's say throw in the money there too, like the whole deal. We want to, but is it worth going to speak to a therapist to see if we can actually handle it? Because our head wants to, or our heart wants to, or our pocket wants to. Is it worth going to check out if this is actually a viable relationship?
Right. So I think I tell this to clients right off the bat, after we go through confidentiality, therapists, and this may sound bad, we know nothing. We're not smarter than the general population. We don't have Ruach HaKodesh. People assume they see us and they're like, oh, you're going to read right through me. You're going to tell me what I'm thinking. It's a joke already. Before you go into become a therapist, I know why this person did this. I want to become a therapist. I know how to read people. And you hear that. And I was probably like that, 20, 30 years ago. The more I'm a therapist, the more I realize we know nothing. We see a person walk in, and even though the father or the mother or the Rebbe said this person is such a narcissist and he's so obnoxious, and then when we see the person, it's a whole new person, because the one thing we do have that the spouse doesn't have, perhaps the Rav of that person doesn't have, or the parent doesn't, we have zero agenda, and we just stay objective. And we're trying to just objectively hear, what do you want for your lifelong goal? What do you want in a partner? And is that really what's happening here? Like you mentioned, that what happens is that, I'm dating for 6 years. This is finally the first person that makes sense. And there's all those loads of things that come along with it. And now I'm stuck. Am I doing it just because I don't want to start the process again? And let me just, hopefully things will be okay and I got a bracha? Or, does this actually make sense? And really, it doesn't have to be a psychologist or a social worker. It could be someone that is so objective. The problem is, it's hard to find someone that's objective. Who wants to break the shidduch? Who wants to be the one that's going to create doubt? And people live with that guilt. And not that we as therapists ever want to do that, but our brains don't go there. this is what's in front of us, and we can only give you what we're objectively hearing. So yes, finally I got someone after 6, 7, 10 years. If I marry this person who got a Yerusha who's worth $10 million, even though he doesn't take his medication or he's not interested, he's a narcissist, and he's, you know what, but at least I'll have the finances, and if I ever need, I can go on vacation for 2 weeks, take a break. We hear that, and we stay objective and say, you could do that, is that what you want? And we bring them back to themselves without all the noise that's telling, sort of like drawing them, just do it, just do it, just do it. And that's what therapy is in a nutshell, and I don't see any reason why a couple wouldn't come. Premarital counseling is huge in the secular world, and it's becoming so much more popular here as well. And you know what, many times, and I'm hearing this a lot, from the Rabbanim I work with here, they go to the Rav before, and that's fine. But they're doing it. They're going to the Rav. It looks maybe more Yiddish, and maybe looks like not so stigmatized. And the Rav is doing the same thing we're going to do. What are your plans right when you get married? What are you both going to continue your treatment plan? Are you both going to continue a therapist? I, the Rav, want you to go for 6 months of counseling right after you get married. They're going to say probably the same thing we're going to say, but it doesn't come with, you're coming to the shrink's office, oh, there's a problem. So I think it's being done, and I think it's maybe not with the same, shingle on the door, but people are doing it, and it's very impressive to see how far we got.
And what people are doing it, and people are doing it for communication styles. That alone, you're coming into a relationship, a marriage, 2 different families, 2 different communication styles, and so many families now are going before marriage. It's wonderful for prevention of any at-risk behaviors as well. Doctor, I want to bring up gambling. There are issues with so many. When having mental illness, it can lead to other at-risk behaviors, and I don't want to leave that out.
Right. Yeah, that's an important piece, and you don't see that, but then again, getting back to it, if they don't feel safe and vulnerable to share, they're going to have other ways of numbing the pain,
right.
Which could be staying at work till, what time am I here till? 9:30, right? They can get away with avoiding conflict through gambling, alcohol, being an askin, right? Which can have that negative, like we're always busy, but you have, children at home. Happens to be I was home. The only reason why I came here was because we were having some internet. We're not supposed to have internet at home, but besides for that, I had to rush back to the office. But other than that, I think it's people have different ways, and if we're well educated that this person has something that could be in tremendous pain, and if they don't have a way to go about it, it may come out on the wife, the kids, or the family structure. So yes, a very important point.
Another question. Should someone with a mental illness marry someone with another mental illness, the same mental illness, or is it irrelevant? Oh.
Right. Yeah. So it's I don't know who asked the question, and I want to be very sensitive and respectful to it. That question in itself may feed into the problem. If I'm a dwarf, should I marry a dwarf? If I'm black, should I marry black? If I'm white, it's almost like where I'm me. This is who I am. You know what? I like sports. You know what? I also get nervous when I go on planes. It shouldn't be any different. So if I'm narcissist, I should marry a narcissist. Like, I hear the question, and it sounds almost like, but it really, this is who I am. And I also have depression. And I also, I want to stay clear from the personality disorders, because that's a little tough, right? But, I have, if I'm diabetic, should I marry a diabetic? It's almost feeding, the other 9. The question is not a question, right? So I think it's important for me to answer this way, just to dissolve that whole, this person struggles with this, and this is how they're going about it. Can I handle that as a person? Can I not? Simple question. It doesn't have to go more deep than it does. And I will say, according to the imago theory, and Freud and all that, it's the opposite. The ADHD person typically will marry the very anxious person, because if this guy comes, late on a date, and he's, his car's all mishkabel, things all over, and then he sees, oh wow, this girl's on time. She's already structuring, the dates, and when we're about to get engaged, she's already thinking of which hall to reserve because we have to think about it. And he's like, wow, this person has it. And she looks at him and says, wow, this guy could actually, go to sleep at 2 a.m. and wake up and hope to have a good day. It's like they find that attractive, the opposites attract. So, no, I don't think bipolars marry bipolars and anxious marry anxious. I think the anxious person will love it in ADHD and vice versa. And I think someone that, has more tendencies towards emotionally dysregulated and sees someone that is regulated, it attracts, because the emotionally dysregulated person can also be at a party and someone that, oh, wow, this is new to me, right? As long as it's, here and not here. And that's where, you want to make sure a severely ADHD doesn't marry severely anxious, because that could be too much for anyone to get to the middle ground.
So as far as like the lay people who think that they understand it, like if she's on meds and then she's going to have to get off meds in order to be pregnant, I think the lay people need to have a better understanding and what that would mean, rather than just making the assumptions that are left over from the 70s and 80s, 90s, 2000s.
Okay, so why don't you'll get the honors, educate us. Is there a problem with psychotropic medications in child rearing or not?
I'm the layperson. I want to learn.
I think, and I'm going to say this, obviously, like they say, we don't take any, the speaker's view doesn't represent Adai Ad or mask, or, right? Majority of medications have no influence on child rearing. I want to stay clear. I'm just going to say that. And if you have a specific question, go ahead and ask. I think, obviously the more complex or the more of a mix, perhaps, or maybe it could definitely impact, drive or could, intimacy, things like that. But I think with anything today that we can classify with a diagnosis and a medication, I don't know, I didn't ask permission before I, from a gynecologist that I spoke to, it's the frum community especially, and you learned a lot from the whole vaccine, anti-vaccine. All I saw from that, I don't even know which side I'm on anymore, right? But all I saw from that is that there's such a firmness that the vaccine will kill you, and not taking the vaccine will also kill you. It's almost like it depends which side you're on. And I don't think anyone's right or wrong. I think at the end of the day, COVID is almost, non-existent, and we have a vaccine. Are people growing the third arm and the third? Maybe, but it depends how you view medicine. Depends how you view, the medical, psychological profession. How many things do they say about therapists? We make more problems. Us therapists, we need our own therapists. We're so crazy. These are the things that people grow up with, and either you educate yourself or not. But from what I heard from a gynecologist, obviously, is that there's an assumption that if you take an SSRI, your kid's going to have autism, your kid's going to have developmental delay. All these things, and I'm being very careful not to, are point of nothing, of a percent. It's the same thing like taking caffeine and wanting to know if that, correlates with autism in children, if this medication will cause anger or ADHD. If you go with the medical science, there's a boatload of research and literature. And if you don't, it's hearsay. I don't know how to answer that. It's really going to depend on your belief system.
But at least if there's an actual situation in front of you, at least try to educate yourself rather than going from your own, conversations from the playground. Sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's the hearsay and the, I know on a personal level, I grew up in a family where even Tylenol, like if you don't need it, don't take it. Try go natural. And until today, if I could avoid it, I could. And then, but I recognize that that's the way I was wired. But then again, I see how many kids today, unfortunately, that are now adults that can't carry a job, that can't even go to the Daf Yomi because they get so frustrated with it. They almost want to slam the Gemara because their parents didn't give them the stimulant that every rabbi begged them and psychiatrists told them to take. And mistreated ADHD leads into addictive behaviors, their impulsivity. They never learned how to learn. So yeshiva became a very, very, just a prison, and everything just because don't take the stimulant. Now, every guy that's, I'm going to be careful with this, making the millions of dollars or running big corp, right? What do they have in their drawer? The Adderalls, and they're popping it, and that's the ones that we should see to get them off it. And for the first time, they're actually being successful. They're actually being structured. Unfortunately, they're doing it on their own. But now all of a sudden it's cool to take Adderall, right? But as a child, it's almost like you're crazy if you do it, and how much damage is done. So I think it's important that people really educate themselves. And I see even with parents that if unfortunately the kid's about to get kicked out of yeshiva, 4th grade, they did OT, they did PT, they did, language processing, and the kid just can't sit. And the kid is doing impulsive behaviors, risky behaviors. And now the yeshiva says we can't let the kid back in. And only then do they take the medication, and it's a life and game over. And the parents come crying. What were we thinking till now? Why didn't we do this sooner? And they don't blame themselves, and we don't blame them. It's a scary, imagine someone tells you that you have to do something that you never heard of. It rips apart your belief of, I can do without it, or my kid is maybe not so normal. But once they see the treatment, it's almost like, wow, it's a whole new world. And halavai, everyone should do the proper education and get there sooner, right? I'm not saying today, tomorrow, because that wouldn't make sense either, right? We want to question or go with our adaptive beliefs, but eventually get there, not wait till it's too late or there's already a consequence in place.
And also, similar to the shiduchim, like if you think that you may have something going on for yourself, you feel a little more anxious than you did in the past, or more anxious then try to figure out what's going on for you, not wait until it explodes, whether it explodes before and or after marriage. It's started as far as with this topic is about marriage specifically, but if you feel that there might be something, start dealing with it, learning how to deal with it, and start managing it as early before marriage, so that you're on a stable progression upward, so that you can actually talk to it, and you'll know that you're marriage ready, rather than just what is going on with me. And
Absolutely.
So I think it's, and there's, like we said, there's lots of firm therapists. If people want to be going home to a firm therapist, Mask has a lot of referrals that you can actually be talking to, but it's not to go because you don't want that diagnosis, like kind of circling back to where we started from, is not going to be helpful in the long run.
Right, and I'll conclude with I don't know if I could be here all night if you want, but I spoke by the Aguda Convention, this past Aguda Convention, and the question was, there was a movement that boys should marry younger, so to, the gap of the age, the 21-year-old shouldn't be marrying the 19, the 22, the 19, and, a lot of girls that end up 22, 23, 24 end up not getting, a match because of the age gap. So the question was, from a psychological level, is it okay for boys 21 to date as opposed to 24? My response was, very, very simple. And this happens so much where the same mother that will call me the year before, when the girl's 19, and say, I must have you see, or one of your staff see my daughter, because this depression that she's always had, or this rage that she's always had, she's going shiduchim in 2 months, we have to get it resolved, right? The same mother will call me when the boy's coming back from Eretz Yisrael at age 23. My son's been, in gambling casinos. He's not been learning for the past 2 years, but now he's in shidduchim. We got to get him. And it's almost like they wait until they need to, and then they make the move. And it's so sad that, people, the biggest predictor for someone to join or see a therapist is not really the resources, again, is not the financials, it's how much pain they're in. So like what you mentioned, Laura, if someone feels, and we find this a lot, that people, and it may sound good or bad, when they actually are in the dating process or about to get engaged, that's when they're no longer in denial that I better take care of this. And that's when they actually get the help. And it's bittersweet at the same time why they waited, but then again, it got them to do that. And they go rapidly, they change very, very quickly, because they know that they really have to take this serious. So yes, please do reach out, and thanks to Mask and Relief and so many organizations and Amudim, there's no end to how many people would be helpful to, answer that call. You just have to pick up the call. That's the hardest part, and you'll see a whole world out there that you never saw.
And there's lots of people in that world.
Yeah, a lot.
Anybody that wants a referral, they can call MASK, and we will let you know about all the organizations that are out there and all the support groups and whatever therapists you may need.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Right. So thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions after you hear this, you can definitely send again a question to info@adaiad.org, or you can reach out to MASK, depending on, of course, what your question is. Dr. Shafer, do you want to just share the link to Empower?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, anyone, can feel free. www.empowerhealthcenter, right, .net. That's our website. You can email office@empowerhealthcenter.net. Number is 732-666-9898. You can call, text, WhatsApp. I would always say, before you want to see a therapist, right, first call MASK. And, not everyone has to, sometimes people hear, such a conversation like, oh my gosh, this talks to me and let me go see a therapist. We deal more with pathology. We deal more with treatments. This may sound inspirational, and there are so many inspirational people like yourselves here. You may want to, not everyone needs therapy, right? If you're listening to this and, you've been struggling with this for so long, and you're like, let me do this, good, go ahead. But there's so much resources out there. Why not utilize it? And make the call is the main thing. Get out there. You'll see the magic afterwards.
Right. Don't hold it alone. It's too much to hold alone.
Yeah.
There's no reason to.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Shafer.
Thank you. It's been such an opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to many more.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night.